The hard hat hit the conference table with a hollow thunk that cut through Brad Pierce's presentation like a circular saw through sheet metal. I'd worn that hat for 32 years, white with the Phoenix Steel logo, scratched from 1,000 facility inspections, with Danny's deployment photo tucked inside the crown where nobody could see it. Now it sat there between Brad's laptop and his organic energy drink, and the whole room went quiet. My name is Harold Davidson. Most people call me Hank. I'm 55 years old, and for the better part of 3 decades, I've been the guy who kept Phoenix Steel's workers from going home in body bags. Senior Operations Safety Manager, dual certified OSHA Safety Officer and EPA Environmental Compliance. 4 facilities across Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky. 2,847 employees who trusted me to make sure they saw their families again at the end of each shift. Brad had just finished explaining why my job was redundant. The presentation was called Operational Efficiency Through Legacy System Optimization. Corporate speak for firing people who remember how things used to explode. Brad was 32, had a Lean Six Sigma black belt certification, and wore shoes that cost more than most of our guys made in a week. His father Stanley was our CFO, which explained how a consultant with 0 manufacturing experience had gotten a direct line to the CEO. I'd been watching this train wreck build steam for months. The private equity firm that bought us last year had been pushing numbers that didn't add up, production quotas that required cutting corners, maintenance schedules that ignored manufacturer specifications, safety briefings reduced from 15 minutes to 5 because workers need more hands-on time, less lecture time. Every protocol I'd spent 32 years building was getting labeled as a barrier to productivity. The hard hat drop wasn't planned. I'd been sitting there listening to Brad explain how my position could be optimized into a junior engineer role, how my legacy mindset was holding back innovation, how modern analytics could replace decades of institutional knowledge. The strap on my hard hat had been cutting into my palm where I'd been gripping it. When he said the phrase old school liability, something in my chest recalibrated like a pressure valve hitting maximum tolerance. So I set it down, not threw it, just placed it on that polished conference table like I was laying down my sidearm after a long deployment. James Whitfield, our CEO, cleared his throat. Hank, we're not eliminating safety. We're streamlining redundancies. Brad's analysis shows significant cost savings through role consolidation. I looked at Gerald Hoffman. Our operations VP guy had 20 years with the company, knew what those facilities looked like when safety protocols got compromised. He was studying his coffee cup like it contained the meaning of life. Gerald, I said, you remember the flash fire at the Kentucky plant in 2018? He nodded without looking up. 3 workers in the hospital because a new supervisor skipped the hot work permit process. Saved 15 minutes on paperwork. Cost us $2.3 million in fines, medical expenses, and downtime. I turned back to Brad. That's the kind of legacy mindset that keeps people breathing. Brad smiled the way consultants smile when they think you're proving their point. Exactly, Hank. We can't operate from a fear-based framework. We need agile safety protocols that adapt to modern production demands. Fear-based framework. I'd heard everything now. Tell me about your manufacturing background, Brad. I have extensive experience in operational optimization across multiple industries. That's not what I asked. Have you ever worked a production floor? Ever seen what happens when molten steel meets human skin? Ever had to call someone's wife and explain why her husband isn't coming home? The room temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Brad's smile flickered. That's exactly the kind of emotional decision-making we're moving away from, Hank. Data-driven protocols eliminate human error. Human error. I stood up slowly. You mean like the human error of caring whether people live or die? James tried to jump in. Hank, let's keep this professional. Professional. I picked up my hard hat, ran my thumb over the scratches. Each one told a story. The deep gouge from the Pennsylvania crane incident in 2019. The burn mark from the West Virginia furnace malfunction in 2021. The small dent from when I'd caught a falling wrench that would have split open a new hire's skull. You know what's professional, James? 32 years without a single fatality. 32 years of workers going home whole. That's professional. What Brad's proposing is Russian roulette with other people's lives. Brad's fingers were dancing over his laptop keyboard, probably updating his slide deck in real time. Hank, your safety record is admirable, but we can't let past performance prevent future optimization. The metrics clearly show The metrics. I set my hat back down, but gentler this time. Let me tell you about metrics, Brad. Metric number 1. My boy Danny works the evening shift at Kentucky. Metric number 2. Every safety protocol I've built over 3 decades is designed to bring him home to me the way the Navy couldn't bring his mother home. That stopped the keyboard clicking. Sarah had died 3 years ago from mesothelioma, workplace asbestos exposure from a job she'd had in the 90s, back when companies treated safety regulations like suggestions. She'd fought it for 18 months, and I'd held her hand through every chemo session, every doctor's visit, every sleepless night when the pain got too bad for morphine to touch. Her last words to me weren't "I love you" or "take care of Danny." They were "don't let them do this to other families." I walked out of that conference room without another word. Back at my office, I pulled up the federal compliance portal on my computer. 2 certifications under my name: OSHA Safety Officer for all 4 Phoenix Steel facilities, EPA Environmental Compliance for the same locations. Both required annual renewal, both tied to my personal credentials, both absolutely non-transferable. The certifications weren't company property. They were individual qualifications that took years to earn and maintain. You couldn't just reassign them in an org chart shuffle. You couldn't download them from a consulting firm's best practices database. They lived in my name, backed by my Navy CB training, and validated by decades of incident-free operations. I'd tried to explain this in a memo 18 months ago when the first round of efficiency consultants arrived. 5 pages of federal statute, compliance requirements, and plain English explanations of what would happen if the named certification holder left the company. I'd sent it to the full leadership team with copies to our legal department. Nobody had responded. The memo probably got filed under legacy mindset resistance to change. Now Brad was upstairs explaining to the board how my role could be absorbed by a recent engineering graduate with an online safety certification. Kid was 24 years old, had never seen a blast furnace operate, and thought PPE stood for personal productivity enhancement. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the OSHA compliance portal, found the section I'd hoped I'd never need: Voluntary Revocation of Active Safety Officer Certification. There was a warning in red text that I read 3 times. Revocation would trigger immediate suspension of all associated facility operations pending new officer certification and full compliance audit. No grace period. No administrative override. My cursor hovered over the confirm button. This wasn't just about me. Danny, my boy, worked the evening shift at the Kentucky facility. 3 years back from Afghanistan, still putting himself back together, but good with his hands and proud of the work. Every safety protocol I maintained was designed to bring him home to me the way the Army couldn't bring his mother home. I thought about the conversation we'd had last week. Danny telling me about the new production quotas, how the supervisors were pushing guys to skip safety checks to make numbers. "Dad, it's getting scary out there. Guys are taking shortcuts because they're afraid of getting written up for being slow." I'd told him to document everything, follow protocols no matter what anyone said. "Your job is to go home safe, son. Everything else is just numbers on someone's spreadsheet." Now those numbers were about to become someone else's problem. I clicked confirm. The system processed the revocation in 4 seconds. Confirmation email appeared in my inbox. OSHA Safety Officer Certification voluntarily revoked, effective immediately. All associated facilities notified of compliance status change. Then I opened the EPA portal and did it again. 2 more clicks, 4 facilities, 2,847 workers. All federal compliance tied to my personal certifications, and I just severed every connection. My phone started buzzing at 9:23 a.m. First call was from Roger Mendez at the Ohio plant. "Hank, what the hell is happening? I've got federal inspectors here saying we're in violation and they're telling everyone to go home. Check your OSHA certificate display. Roger, see who's listed as the safety officer." Pause, Harold Davidson. "But that's, oh, Brad's got it handled, right? All that modern analytics and agile safety protocols." Roger's laugh had no humor in it. "They're padlocking the gates, Hank. These inspectors aren't messing around. They said something about a pattern of private equity buyouts followed by safety cuts. We're getting the full treatment." The calls kept coming. Pennsylvania at 9:47. "Hank, they've got yellow tape across every entrance. Union's going crazy. Eddie Kowalski wants to know what's going on. West Virginia at 10:15. Federal marshals just showed up with the inspectors. This isn't a normal audit, Hank. They're treating this like a criminal investigation." Kentucky at 10:23, and that one hurt because I could hear Danny's voice in the background asking what was going on. "Dad, They're saying the plant's shut down indefinitely, something about safety officer certification being revoked. That's you, isn't it? Yeah, son, that's me. What happened? Your old man just became unemployed, but don't worry about it. This'll sort itself out. By 11 a.m., all 4 facilities were dark. 2,847 people sent home without pay pending federal compliance review. The fines started accruing immediately, $445,000 per day for OSHA violations, $340,000 per day for EPA noncompliance, $785,000 daily burn rate with zero revenue coming in. The federal investigators weren't playing games. They'd seen the pattern before. Private equity buyouts followed by safety cuts followed by worker injuries. Phoenix Steel was going to get the full audit treatment, which meant 45 to 90 days minimum before any new certifications could be approved. And that was assuming they could find someone qualified to take my place. James Whitfield called me at 11:47. Hank, we need to talk. About what, James? I thought you were streamlining redundancies. This isn't funny. We've got 4 plants shut down and nearly 3,000 workers out of a job. Temporary administrative issue, right? Brad's got agile solutions for everything. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear his breathing change. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all its corporate smoothness. What do you want? I don't want anything, James. I'm just an old-school liability who doesn't fit your modern framework. Problem solved itself, Hank, please. Be reasonable. People are going to lose their jobs over this. People were going to lose their lives over this. At least now they're just losing paychecks. I hung up and drove home to my empty house, sat in Sarah's chair with a cup of coffee, and waited for the phone to ring again. It didn't take long. The first callback came at 1:30 p.m. from Patricia Liu at Apex Manufacturing. Word traveled fast in our industry, especially when someone with dual federal certifications suddenly became available. Mr. Davidson, we heard about the situation at Phoenix Steel. We're wondering if you'd be interested in discussing a consulting arrangement. Apex was Phoenix's biggest competitor. They'd been trying to poach experienced safety managers for years. What kind of consulting? Safety oversight, compliance management, facility certification. We're expanding our operations and need someone with your credentials. The rate would be $275 per hour, with a minimum 30-hour week guaranteed. I'd been making $87,000 a year at Phoenix. $275 an hour worked out to over $500,000 annually if they kept me busy. When do you want to start the conversation? How about tomorrow morning? We can send a car. By Thursday morning, 3 more companies had called. Word was spreading through the industry like wildfire. Phoenix Steel had lost their certified safety officer right before a major expansion, and everyone wanted to know who was responsible for nearly 30 years of incident-free operations. The second call came from Industrial Safety Solutions in Pittsburgh. Mr. Davidson, we've been following your work for years. We'd like to offer you a position as Regional Safety Director. $180,000 base salary, plus performance bonuses. The third was Consolidated Manufacturing in Cleveland. Hank, we need someone who understands both OSHA and EPA compliance. We're looking at $200,000 annually, full benefits, company vehicle. The fourth call surprised me. It was from Eddie Kowalski, the union rep at Phoenix. Hank, you need to know what's happening here. They brought in a bunch of consultants trying to figure out how to get the plants back online. Nobody understands the certification process. That kid Brad was running around with printouts from some website, trying to tell federal investigators that safety protocols could be temporarily modified during the transition period. Eddie's voice dropped lower. The feds aren't buying it. They've got investigators going through every safety incident from the past 5 years, every shortcut, every deferred maintenance, every time someone got hurt because of cost-cutting measures. This isn't just about getting new certifications, Hank. This is turning into a criminal investigation. That afternoon, Gerald Hoffman called me from his personal phone. Hank, Brad's gone. Stanley resigned this morning. James wants to know what it would take to bring you back. Can't, I said. Voluntary revocation resets everything. I'd have to reapply from scratch, same as any new candidate, minimum 60-day process, probably longer given the circumstances. What about interim consulting while the paperwork goes through? Federal regulations don't allow interim arrangements for safety officer positions. Gerald, you know that. The whole point of the certification system is that there's no workaround, no temporary fix. Either you have a qualified safety officer or you don't. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. The Kentucky plant's not coming back online, is it? I looked out my window at the gray January sky. Equipment's been sitting idle for a week in a corrosive environment with no maintenance protocols running. Even if I could fast-track certification, you're looking at months of inspection and remediation before that facility passes federal standards again. How many months? Best case? 6. More likely 9 to 12. That's assuming the investigation doesn't turn up anything that requires major infrastructure changes. Which meant Danny and 400 other Kentucky workers were permanently out of work because Brad Pierce thought 32 years of safety expertise could be replaced by a consultant with a laptop. Gerald's voice was barely above a whisper. Jesus, Hank, what have we done? Friday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. James Whitfield, but this time he wasn't using his corporate phone. Hank, I'm calling from my car. I need to ask you something off the record. I'm listening. The federal investigators want to interview you. They're asking about safety protocol overrides deferred maintenance authorizations. Any documentation you might have about management pressure to cut corners. I sat back in my chair. What kind of documentation, James? Internal memos, email chains, meeting minutes. Anything that shows a pattern of prioritizing production over safety. I thought about the folder on my computer. 6 months worth of emails, meeting notes, and documented incidents. Every time Brad had overridden a safety protocol.
Every time Stanley had questioned maintenance costs. Every time James had pushed back on safety briefing time because it affected production quotas.
I kept records, James. It's what safety officers do. We document everything because when something goes wrong, everyone wants to know who signed off on what. Those records, would they implicate the company in willful safety violations? That depends. Are you asking me as the CEO trying to assess legal liability, or as someone who's genuinely concerned about worker safety? Long pause. Both? Then, yes, James? Those records would show a clear pattern of management pressure to compromise safety protocols in favor of production goals. That's textbook willful violation territory, which carries criminal penalties. The line went dead. That evening, Danny came by the house. First time I'd seen him since the shutdown. He looked tired, worried in the way young veterans get when they can't control their environment. Dad, there's something you need to know. The guys at the plant have been talking. Some of them are saying you did this on purpose, that you knew what would happen when you pulled those certifications. What do you think? Danny sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, same position he used to take when he was little and needed to tell me something important. I think Brad Pierce was going to get someone killed. I think you knew it, and I think you stopped it the only way you could. He looked up at me. But 2,800 people are out of work now, Dad, including me. You worried about the money? No. You taught me to save, remember? I've got enough to get by for a while. But some of the older guys, the ones with mortgages and kids in college, they're scared and they're angry. At me, some of them. They don't understand the certification system. They think you could come back tomorrow if you wanted to, that you're holding out for more money or trying to prove a point. I walked to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Danny. What would you do, son, if you saw people you cared about walking into danger, and the only way to stop them was to do something that hurt them in the short term, but kept them alive in the long term? Danny sipped his coffee, thinking in Afghanistan, we had a CO who called off a mission because he didn't trust the intelligence. Half the platoon was furious, said he was being overcautious, that we were missing our chance to complete the objective. What happened? Later found out the whole area was rigged with IEDs. If we'd gone through with the mission, most of us would have come home in boxes. Danny set down his cup. Sometimes the hardest decision is the one that saves lives, even when everyone hates you for it. Monday morning, I started my new position as Director of Safety Operations for Apex Manufacturing. They'd offered me a permanent role overseeing 6 facilities across 3 states, with a salary that made my Phoenix years look like volunteer work. My first day, I spent 3 hours walking the floor with their safety team, checking procedures, talking to workers. Everything I'd built at Phoenix over 32 years, I could build again at Apex in half the time. And this management team actually listened when I explained why certain protocols existed. The difference was night and day. At Phoenix, I'd been fighting for every safety measure, justifying every protocol, defending every minute of training time. At Apex, the CEO's first question was, what do you need to keep our people safe? When I explained that proper safety briefings required 15 minutes minimum, he said, take 20 if you need it. Production numbers don't matter if people get hurt. Within 2 weeks, I'd implemented a comprehensive safety training program. Within a month, Apex's worker satisfaction scores were the highest in the industry. By the end of the quarter, their insurance premiums had dropped 30% because of their improved safety record. Meanwhile, Phoenix Steel was bleeding to death. The federal investigation had expanded beyond simple certification issues. Investigators found a pattern of deferred maintenance going back 3 years. Safety equipment that should have been replaced was instead refurbished by the lowest bidder. Training programs that used to run 2 days were cut to 4 hours. Incident reports that used to trigger immediate protocol reviews were being filed without follow-up. Eddie Kowalski called me with updates every few weeks. Hank, they found documentation showing Brad's team had calculated exactly how much they could cut from safety budgets before triggering federal attention. They literally had a spreadsheet with acceptable risk levels for worker injuries. The criminal investigation led to federal charges, not just against Phoenix Steel as a corporation, but against individual executives. Stanley Pierce was indicted for conspiracy to commit workplace safety violations. James Whitfield was facing federal charges for willful endangerment. Brad Pierce himself had vanished into the consulting world, probably telling other companies how to optimize human capital through efficiency frameworks. 6 months later, Phoenix Steel filed for bankruptcy. The private equity firm pulled out after the federal investigations turned up 3 decades of deferred maintenance and safety shortcuts. The Kentucky plant never reopened. 1,200 jobs lost permanently, along with the pension fund that senior workers had been counting on for retirement. But here's what the newspapers didn't report. 0 workers died during the shutdown. 0 families got the phone call I'd had to make too many times in my Navy days. 0 wives became widows because someone decided that production quotas mattered more than proper safety procedures. Danny called me that evening with news I'd been hoping to hear. Dad, I got accepted into the safety engineering program at Ohio State. Apex is sponsoring my education through their professional development program. They said when I graduate, there's a position waiting for me as a junior safety officer. Working under whose certification? Yours, Dad. Until I qualify for my own? I looked out my office window at the Apex production floor. Third, shift was starting, workers putting on their PPE, following the procedures I'd spent months perfecting. Everything running smooth, safe, the way Sarah would have wanted. Your mother would be proud of both of us, I said. A year later, I got an unexpected visitor. James Whitfield, looking older and grayer than I remembered. The federal charges against him had been reduced to fines and community service, but his career in corporate management was finished. Hank, I wanted to apologize and to ask you something. I'm listening. I'm starting a nonprofit focused on workplace safety advocacy, using my experience as a cautionary tale, trying to help other companies avoid what happened to Phoenix. I was wondering if you'd consider joining the board of advisors. I studied his face. The corporate arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. What's the mission? Education.
Helping companies understand that safety isn't overhead, it's infrastructure.
That experience, like yours, isn't a cost center. It's the foundation that everything else builds on. Who's funding it? Insurance companies mostly. They've figured out that preventing workplace injuries is cheaper than paying claims, plus some government grants for safety education programs. I thought about it for a week before giving him my answer. Yes, but with conditions. The nonprofit would be worker-focused, not management-focused. It would emphasize the value of experienced safety professionals, not cost-cutting measures. And it would honor Sarah's memory by preventing other families from going through what we did. The program launched 6 months later. We've consulted with over 200 companies, prevented countless shortcuts, and saved lives that will never make it into any safety statistics because nothing bad happened. Danny graduated last month with highest honors in his safety engineering program. He's starting as a junior safety officer at Apex's newest facility, working under my certification until he qualifies for his own. Every day he's learning the same lesson I learned in the Navy and spent 32 years applying in civilian life. Your job is to bring everyone home safe. Sarah would have been proud of both of us. If you've made it this far, you already know what this story is really about. It's not about EPA licenses or federal certifications. It's about what happens when companies decide that experience doesn't matter, that knowledge accumulated over decades can be replaced by algorithms and consultants who've never actually done the work. Most of you watching this have been there. You've seen good people pushed aside for cheaper alternatives, watched companies cut corners until something breaks. dealt with management that treats workers like spreadsheet entries instead of human beings with families, depending on them coming home safe every night. Here's what I learned: your knowledge has weight. Your experience protects people, and when someone tells you that doesn't matter anymore, they're about to find out exactly how much it was worth all along. You don't have to make noise to have leverage. You just have to know what you're actually holding. Sometimes, the best way to prove your value is to let people see what happens when you're not there. Phoenix Steel thought they could replace 32 years of safety expertise with a consultant and a computer program. They found out the hard way that keeping people alive isn't something you can optimize on a spreadsheet. Your experience matters. Your knowledge protects others. When people dismiss that, they endanger everyone you've spent your career keeping safe.